whispers among the tombstones. The townsfolk said she was mad. They whispered it behind cupped hands, eyes darting toward the cemetery's gate where her silhouette often lingered. Zara was her name, a woman draped in shadows, accused of speaking to the dead as if they were living. Children were pulled closer to their mothers when she passed in the marketplace, and men exchanged knowing glances, shaking their heads at her supposed lunacy. Yet no one ever dared to follow her. No one ever asked what she truly said among the graves. Armin had no patience for gossip. He had buried his wife Sadia 2 years ago, and since then, the world felt as though it existed in muted tones. He moved through life with the weight of unfinished conversations pressing down on him. Questions left unanswered, laughter silenced too soon. Each week he walked to the graveyard, flowers in hand, and sat by Sadia's stone. It was the only place he felt alive, though it was also where his heart reminded him of death. One late afternoon, as the sky burned with a copper glow, Armin noticed he was not alone. Just beyond his wife's grave stood Zura, lips moving in a soft murmur. Her posture was reverent, her head bowed, as though she were engaged in prayer. At first, he thought she was addressing one of her own departed relatives, but then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of his wife's name slipping from her lips. Sadia, you always listened when no one else did. Armin's chest tightened. He froze, torn between outrage and bewilderment. Why was this woman, this supposed madwoman, speaking to his wife's grave as though it were her confidant? The town's gossip came flooding back. Zara wanders among headstones, talking to shadows. Zara has lost her mind. Armin had dismissed it all, but here she was, proving every rumor true. Yet, the tone in her voice was not deranged. It was tender, wounded, intimate in a way that unsettled him. He waited, hidden behind the marble marker of another grave, and listened. Zara's words carried a weight heavier than the autumn air. She spoke of betrayal, of being abandoned by the man she trusted most. She confessed her loneliness, the scorn of neighbors, the unbearable silence of nights where she wished she had never married. And woven through her lament was Sadia's name, repeated like an anchor. Sadia, the only soul who once believed her. Armin's grief collided with curiosity. Why would his wife's name be on Zara's lips? Sadia had been kind in life, yes, but she had been reserved, private. Did she know Zara? Did she comfort her once? Questions swirled in his mind, blurring with the ache of loss. The sun dipped lower, and Zara finally rose. She touched the headstone gently, almost lovingly, then turned toward the iron gate. In that fleeting moment, Armin saw her face clearly, the tired hollowness in her eyes, the strength barely clinging to her shoulders. She was not a madwoman. She was someone carrying an invisible weight, someone unraveling quietly while the world jeered. As she disappeared down the path, Armin remained rooted beside Sadia's grave. His heart pounded with a strange mix of guilt and intrigue. Guilt because he had listened to words not meant for him. Intrigue because her sorrow seemed tethered to his wife, and by extension, to him. He looked down at the stone before him, the familiar letters etched deep into marble. Sadia Armin, beloved wife, eternal light. For 2 years, that inscription had defined his days. Yet now, hearing another voice speak to the same stone, he felt something stir, a dangerous curiosity, a pull toward the woman the town called mad. By the time he left the graveyard, night had descended, and the air carried a chill that clung to his skin. He tried to shake off the image of Zara's bowed head, her whispered confessions. But her voice haunted him, threading itself through his thoughts as he walked home. The world had labeled her insane, yet what he witnessed was not madness. It was pain, pain that mirrored his own, though born of different wounds. He told himself it was none of his concern, that her life and her secrets were separate from his. Still, the question would not leave him. Why did she speak to Sadia's grave as though she had lost her own soul there? Armin closed his door that night with the weight of the cemetery still pressing on his heart. He had gone to mourn his wife, but instead he had discovered another kind of grief, living, breathing, wearing the face of a woman the town scorned. And though he did not yet know it, his life had already shifted. Zara's sorrow had reached across the grave and touched him, planting a seed of curiosity that would soon grow into something forbidden. The confession. Armin could not ignore it. The memory of Zara whispering to Sadia's grave stayed with him like a fever he could not sweat out. For 3 nights he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice replay in his head. Each word carried a rawness that gnawed at him. Betrayal, loneliness, silence. He had gone to mourn his wife, but instead he had unearthed a riddle. Why would this woman bare her soul before the stone that bore Sadia's name? On the 4th evening, Armin returned to the cemetery with a resolve he scarcely recognized in himself. The air was heavy, the wind carrying the faint perfume of wilting roses. As he approached, he saw her again, Zara, sitting cross-legged before Sadia's grave, speaking in low tones. He did not hide this time. He stepped closer, his voice steady though his heart trembled. "Why are you here?" Speaking to her. Zara's head snapped up, her eyes wide, as though caught trespassing. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the caw of a distant crow. Then she exhaled, her shoulders sagging. She listened, Zara said softly, when no one else would. Armin frowned. "You knew my wife?" A bitter smile flickered across Zara's lips. "Not as you did, but once, when my world began collapsing, she was the only person who believed me." Armin waited. Something in her tone compelled him to stay, though every part of him wanted to retreat back into the safety of grief. Zara's gaze drifted to the carved letters on the stone. "My husband, Farhan, was never faithful. Everyone adored him, his charm, his confidence, his lies. When I discovered the truth, when I dared to say it aloud, the town turned against me. They said I was jealous, unstable. But Sadia, she told me I wasn't imagining it. She told me to be strong." The word struck Armin like a bell. Sadia, gentle, private Sadia, had extended her kindness to this broken woman. It should have comforted him, yet instead it left him unsettled. Sadia had carried burdens he had never seen, shared compassion he had not known about. Now that compassion tied Zara to him, weaving their grief together in an unexpected bond. "You come here," Armin said slowly, "to speak to her spirit?" Zara nodded. "After she passed, there was no one left to hear me. The town laughs, calls me mad. Perhaps I am. But here, at her grave, I am not invisible." Armin studied her. There was no wildness in her eyes, no frenzy in her voice. Only exhaustion, the kind born of long battles fought alone. The rumors suddenly seemed crueler than ever. He should have left it at that. A polite nod, a few words of condolence, and then retreat back into solitude. But instead he found himself asking, "And now? What do you seek here?" Zara's lips trembled, as though the question pierced a shield she had tried to hold. "Peace," she whispered, "and perhaps forgiveness, for loving a man who betrayed me, for staying too long, for still caring when I should have walked away." Armin's chest tightened. He thought of Sadia, of his own regrets, the words he had left unsaid before death claimed her. He too sought forgiveness, though from a woman who could no longer grant it. In Zara's voice, he heard an echo of his own pain. For a moment, silence enveloped them both. The cemetery seemed to draw in closer, as though the dead leaned in to listen. "Zara," he said finally, her name tasting unfamiliar on his tongue. "The town is wrong. You are not mad." Her eyes lifted to his, startled. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or the faintest thread of connection. "I don't know what I am," she murmured, "but I know I'm alone." The honesty of it disarmed him. He had walked these grounds certain that no one could understand the weight of his loss. Yet here was a woman, branded as mad, who mirrored his own solitude. A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of earth and fading blossoms. Armin found himself reaching out, though he stopped short, his hand hovering between them. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we don't have to be." Zara did not take his hand, yet she did not recoil either. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and fragile hope, as though afraid the moment would vanish if she breathed too deeply. The sky had darkened by then, the first stars trembling into view. Armin knew he should leave, that lingering too long would invite more questions than he was ready to answer. But as he turned to go, he glanced back and saw her still sitting there, head bowed, whispering once more to the grave. He walked away with the sound of her voice trailing him, and with it, a dangerous awareness. Their grief had touched, and once touched, it could not be easily untangled. The forbidden flame. Armin told himself he would not return. After his last conversation with Zara, he promised that the cemetery would remain sacred, untouched by anything but his grief. Yet 3 days later he found himself walking the familiar path once more, his heart betraying his resolve. Zara was there, as if she had been waiting. She stood not before Sadia's grave this time, but near the old willow tree, her hands clasped before her. When she saw him, she did not startle. Instead, a faint smile ghosted across her lips, fragile yet unmistakable. They began to speak in low tones, voices carrying the hesitancy of two souls unaccustomed to companionship. At first, their words circled grief, Sadia's laughter that still haunted Armin's home, Zara's nights spent staring into the dark, listening to echoes of Farhan's betrayals. Slowly, though, the conversations widened. They spoke of books Armin once read aloud to Sadia, of the garden Zara tended in silence, of the small, overlooked beauties that proved life still existed beyond sorrow. Each meeting blurred the line between solace and desire. Armin found himself anticipating her voice, the way she tilted her head when listening, the rare moments when her laughter slipped free. Zara, in turn, began to lean on his steadiness, finding in him a gentleness she had once believed no man possessed. But with closeness came guilt. At night, Armin sat in his dimly lit room, staring at Sadia's photograph. Her eyes, frozen forever in kindness, seemed to ask him questions he could not answer. Was he betraying her memory by letting another woman's voice soothe him? Could love after loss exist without desecrating what came before? Zara wrestled with her own torment. Farhan's shadow lingered in every corner of her thoughts. Though his infidelity had shattered their bond, his name still clung to hers in the eyes of the town. To meet another man in secret, especially the widower of the woman who had once defended her, felt like daring society to sharpen its knives further. And yet she could not stop herself. Armin's presence was the first balm her wounds had ever known. The town, as always, noticed. Whispers grew louder, eyes lingered longer. Armin caught fragments in the marketplace, his name entwined with Zara's, his loyalty to Sadia questioned. Some called Zara a temptress, others pitted Armin for being deceived. Their companionship, innocent though it remained in its beginnings, was already branded as scandal. One evening, rain fell heavy over the town, turning the graveyard paths into rivers of mud. Armin found Zara sheltering beneath the willow tree, her shawl soaked through, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears. "You shouldn't have come," she said when she saw him. "Neither should you," he replied, voice low. "And yet here we are." Something broke in that moment, the dam that had held back their restraint. He stepped closer, close enough to see the trembling of her lips, the defiance in her gaze, masking despair. "I can't keep speaking to shadows, Armin," Zara whispered. "I need someone who hears me." His hand rose, almost against his will, brushing the damp hair from her cheek. The warmth of her skin beneath his fingers ignited a spark that felt both forbidden and inevitable. "Then speak to me," he murmured. The rain muffled the world around them as they leaned into each other, an unspoken pact sealed not with words, but with silence and touch. For a moment, Armin felt life flood back into him, life that had lain dormant since Sadia's last breath. For Zara, it was the first time her voice did not vanish unheard into the void. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, the weight of their actions settled over them. Guilt, sharp and immediate, clawed at Armin's chest. Zara's eyes shimmered with both relief and fear. "This is wrong," she said, though her body trembled as if craving more. "Perhaps," Armin admitted, his voice ragged. "But it is also real." They stood together beneath the willow, the storm raging around them, knowing that they had crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. The path ahead was dangerous, marked by judgment, shame, and secrets, but neither could turn back now. As the rain eased and the night deepened, they parted reluctantly, each carrying the weight of what had begun. Armin returned home with the taste of her still lingering, torn between sorrow and desire. Zara walked alone, her steps heavy, her heart pounding with both dread and a fragile flicker of hope. Neither spoke the word affair, but both knew it had already taken root. Shadows and reckoning. The storm that had bound them beneath the willow did not stay hidden for long. In a town that thrived on whispers, secrecy was a fragile illusion. Within days, eyes followed Zara more closely, and Armin heard his name tangled with hers in every murmur. It was not the town's voice that struck fear into their hearts. It was Farhan's. He confronted Zara one evening, his voice like a blade drawn from its sheath. "So the rumors are true," he spat, his handsome face twisted with contempt. "You've been meeting the widower. Have you no shame?" Zara's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. "Shame?" she echoed, her voice brittle. "You dare speak of shame, when your betrayal burned our home to ash." Farhan sneered, unmoved. "No one believes you, Zara. They never did. They see only a woman too weak to keep her husband, too foolish to keep her dignity. And now you cling to a grieving man, hoping he'll make you whole." Her chest heaved with fury, but before she could answer, Armin appeared. He had followed the raised voices into the street, his presence stilling the air. "Enough," Armin said, his tone cutting through the venom. "You destroyed her long before I came into her life." Farhan laughed harshly. "And what of your wife, Armin? Do you think Sadia smiles down on you now, as you defile her memory with this madness?" The words struck like stones. Armin faltered, his guilt surging to the surface. But then he saw Zara, her eyes wide, her shoulders trembling beneath the weight of Farhan's scorn, and his resolve hardened. Sadia was compassion itself, Armin said firmly. She defended Zara when no one else would. She would not condemn me for standing where she once stood. The townsfolk, drawn by the shouting, gathered like moths around the scene. Faces blurred in the torchlight, curiosity mingling with judgment. For the first time, the truth hung naked before them. Not whispered, not cloaked, but declared. Zara could not endure their eyes. She fled, tears streaking her cheeks, her feet carrying her to the only place where she had ever felt seen, Sadia's grave. Armin found her there, collapsed before the stone, her sobs breaking the night's stillness. "I've ruined you," she whispered when she felt his presence. "They'll never forgive us. You'll never be free of their scorn." He knelt beside her, his hand brushing hers. "I was never free, Zara. Grief bound me tighter than any chain. But you make me breathe again." She shook her head, pressing her forehead against the cold marble. "It feels like betrayal, Armin, to love you here, in front of her, as if we've stolen what isn't ours." His eyes softened, grief and tenderness woven together. "Loving you doesn't erase Sadia. She lives in me still. But grief is not all she left me. She left me her kindness. She left me her belief in second chances. And perhaps she left me you." The words silenced her sobs, though tears still glistened on her lashes. She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not just the widower but the man, broken, flawed, yet offering her the one thing Farhan never had, truth. Around them, the cemetery was still, the stones like silent witnesses. Zara's hand slipped into Armin's, tentative yet deliberate. The weight of the world had not lifted, but in that moment it no longer pressed them apart. "Do you believe," she asked softly, "that two broken hearts can make something whole?" Armin's thumb traced circles over her knuckles, steady, unhurried. "I believe it is the only way we survive." They sat together in the hush of the night, the grave between them and yet binding them, not as rivals to the dead, but as companions who had endured their own deaths in life. When they finally rose, the future remained uncertain. The town would not forget, nor forgive easily. Farhan would not vanish quietly. Yet as they walked hand in hand through the cemetery gates, they no longer walked alone. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth, the kind that promised new growth after storms. They called her mad, Armin thought as he glanced at Zara's weary but unbroken face. But perhaps madness is only another name for the courage to love when the world insists it is wrong. And with that, the story did not end but unfolded anew. Two souls stepping into an uncertain dawn, burdened by shadows yet bound by the dangerous, undeniable flame of love.